So we are joined for this discussion about the work going forward, the use of strategies and ideas and commitments. The panel will include not only Tom Shaver, who we've met and heard from. It will also include President Rick Baser from Northwest Vista College of Alamo College District, and I'm pleased to say a president for Latino Student Success. Steve Bullard, Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Stephen F. Austin University. And Jerome Drain, Associate Vice Chancellor, Academic Instruction at Houston Community College. And I don't get to say this, we have a female-dominated organization. I get to say, hello, gentlemen. It's good to be with you. So make sure that you're unmuted to the extent that we're going to give a question and we're going to ask you to respond. So to get going, because each of you has an important role within your campus, but we've also queued this up in a pretty macro way, so you should feel free to go from your campus to wherever you want to go to talk about what's in your mind, and I'll say what's in your heart, as it relates to the immediate challenges that you foresee for your student population as you get ready for this academic year with all that we've described. And since I am looking at this, and you don't know who I'm looking at, I'm going to ask President Baser if you could kick things off.
You know, in listening to you over the last half hour, you described our students very, very well. About 76% of those students are part-timers. About 35% of our students come directly from a high school. And so the profile fits us very well, 63%. We are a proud Hispanic serving institution, and we've been very successful. But there's some things that we've discovered over the last few years that we had to bring into play. One of my vice presidents, Debbie Gatan, has a tendency to say we have to care out loud. It's not fair enough. It's not good enough just to care. They have to know. People have to know that we care. And so we really started down that journey a few years ago at San Antonio College, where they started the first of our, now all 5 colleges have student advocacy centers. Because we realized that we were losing students not because of academics, not because of pathways. We were losing them because they had food insecurities. They had housing insecurities, and they were part-timers. And so they were on in that mode that life could get in the way at every opportunity. And so we created these as a wraparound service, and we partnered. We partner with everybody, the United Way, all of their agencies. We have full-time counseling. We have interns from local universities in social work that work directly with the students, trying to package all of those other areas they may get in the way of their education. Now, we've done all the other things. There is a huge technology divide. We have, in fact, the largest socioeconomic divide in the nation in San Antonio. The second side is we have a chancellor in Mike Flores, who came in a couple of years ago, a longtime president at Palo Alto. And his dream was one that we all bought into immediately. And that was, we have to break the cycle of poverty. We have to go beyond just having a great access point and being welcoming. We have to follow Martha Cantor and have an Alamo Promise program where we can actually provide access free of charge, so they're not looking at that total cost down the way, that there is a means and a method. We partnered with the county, we partnered with the city, and we're able to start that in the 20+ high schools, the lowest socioeconomic high schools in Bexar County. But it's going to be, this I think will change the face of who we serve. I think these are those things that we will have families, because it is one thing I've learned about living in San Antonio, it's all about family. You don't sell to the student, you sell to the family. You have to have them confident and secure. And I think that's where we have tried to go, is going beyond and caring out loud in our community.
Thank you. And I'm going to use the way I see you to call on you. So, Vice Chancellor Drain, tell us a bit about the world from Houston Community College and how you're looking at both who you serve, but also what you are seeking in this new academic year.
So thank you for that question. As luck has it, my your people just showed up. I don't know if you can hear that or not. But we at Houston Community College, we are a large institution. So we're 60,000 students. The post-traditional profile, Sarita, that you described, once again, the same as Ricky, that's our student population. So what we're challenged with really is how do we provide that personal touch and that connection with students at scale. So we're not the individual colleges, even though we're made up of 7 colleges. What we're trying to do in terms of producing a schedule that is conducive and allows for the cohorting of a large population of students at our various colleges while maintaining that equity. So that's what we're seeking to do, is to figure out how do we provide those learning opportunities in the classroom, provide that special touch that what I've asked my deans and faculty, it's really because we care. That's the reason why we're different. So once again, it's developing that sense of community. And that's what Ricky was saying too. And that's what we try to do when working with, our, we're a minority serving institution. So working with our population is providing that personal touch, because we know that they do come with challenges, but those are challenges that we are excited about. That's the reason why we work at the community colleges and do the work that we do, is when we make those connections with students. So we're doing those types of things. We're partnering as well with the community to help, once again, to create a sense of community. So for us, when we talk about our workforce programs, for example, so it's really that community, the advisory boards that are associated with the work that we do, to really just develop a plan that really is a cocoon around the students for them once they enter into the college and once they matriculate to us, and if they go into the workplace or if they go to one of our senior partners. We really want to have those wraparound services as well as that personal touch for all of the students. So now in the world of COVID, that is particularly a challenge. So we're trying to figure out what's the best way to do that, to provide that personal touch and meet students where they are, coming into our institution and help them succeed.
Thank you. Thank you. And from Stephen F. Austin, Provost Bullard.
Yes, thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation so far, and also sharing these actions really helps broaden ideas and put on the ground, put legs on things on the ground. Stephen F. Austin State University is a regional comprehensive. We're about 15,000 full-time equivalent students. But to characterize, and we're in deep East Texas, but to characterize a little bit about our student population, if you just look at the coordinating board's almanac and look at the data for SFA, of the students who actually receive a bachelor's degree here, in other words, when we shake their hands, the ones who actually succeed, 74% of those students, according to the coordinating board, which is accurate data, 74% of them are considered at risk. And that means 5 different things. It means they were either Pell eligible, or in unduplicated percentages, or they finished high school with a GED, or they started college at age 21 or later, or they started by taking fewer than 12 hours, or they were lower than the national average on ACT, SAT. So 74% of our bachelor's graduates are considered at risk. And yet our average time to completion is 4.5 years, again, in the same almanac. And the average number of semester credit hours taken is about 133. And by the way, we do have some degree programs that require more than 120, so that's normal. For example, our forestry major requires 130 hours. But what I wanted to say is, so what that means is, given those numbers, we're very tactical. To go back to your word, Sarita, we do make tactical choices all the time, and we have been for years. In this pandemic situation, of course, it's requiring this is truly a mass extinction event in terms of higher education across our nation. And the survivors will be the ones who make the best tactical decisions to meet the needs of our students in spite of the pandemic. And so that's why I'm very happy. And again, to go back to other points that have been made, both Jerome and Ricky mentioned about caring. There's an old saying that they have to know how much you care before they care how much you know. And I think that comes out when you communicate with people. I know I've heard a quote from Maya Angelou that we use here all the time, that our students may forget what we tell them, they may forget what we do, but they'll never forget how we made them feel. And that goes back to the sense of belonging that Tom talked about. It's absolutely critical. And I want to come back to that a little later if we can, to talk about some ideas that can scale on that very topic.
Absolutely. So I have all kinds of curiosities now for all of you, but I guess to give us all a little bit of a clue how we're to do this conversation, Tom, given what we've now heard from these three leaders, what's top of the brain for them as we start this conversation? Reactions, comments?
Well, probably the number one reaction is that even as a technology company, you know, the passion for doing this work, and the kind of work, again, it's very technical in many cases with the data, but if we don't start with why, and I can tell you that internally, our team internally has been much more engaged, much more passionate about their work, as we've gotten better about communicating our own why of partnering with institutions to help them realize their mission. You know, our why is to educate, to people deserve to be valued, educated, and transformed. And you know, it's very much in partnering with institutions to realize their own why. One thing I really want to quickly say though is that I'd be the first to tell you that this stuff is really, really hard. And that's why it is so critical that we start with an unwavering commitment to get better at it, because it's easy to just shrug our shoulders and give up and say, wow, this stuff is really complicated and it's really controversial and our culture is really embedded. And if we stop there, obviously we're going to not allow ourselves to get better. And if you really think about it, I mean, the people on this panel, Srita, yourself, you know, all of you that came up through the academic side of higher education, I mean, you did that because you were great instructors, you had a passion for your area of expertise, and you were respected by your peers. But none of you have been classically trained as essentially accidental COOs of these massive multi-million-dollar organizations. And I can tell you personally, as a leader who is horrible at the operations side of the house, I mean, I love vision, I love getting involved in the solutions and trying to lead that way. But it's not trivial trying to run a software company of 110 people. But imagine the complexity of what our academic leaders are having to do without classical training, running organizations that are multiples larger with multiples more dollars on the line, and trying to coordinate all that together in a, frankly, an industry that is anything but top down. And so how do you weave all that together? It's really, really hard work. And again, I think that's why it's so important that we do start with the kind of this unwavering commitment to get better, because it's such important work. I think you're still muted, Srita.
I totally agree, and I will add the fact that even under normal circumstances, everything, Tom, you just said is true. And right before the pandemic, I'm sure all of you saw, read, heard the decline in public opinion about higher education, the blowback as it relates to the value proposition. Excelencia in Education interacts a lot with foundations, and so both Lumina and the Gates Foundation has all kinds of Gallup, Strata, they're all doing that. And that was already, I'm not saying that this is reacting to it, but that was already underway. And that was in a conventional kind of approach to higher education administration. Now, I don't want to say we're in free fall, but we are in a exciting moment because whoever is effective with the urgent stays in the game. And all of you are. And so then the capacity to say, then how do we learn while delivering and then move forward? So I'm going to ask each of you to reflect on that one. And but I'm going to come back to Steve because your knowledge of your students in and of itself, to me, is a sign of leadership. With all due respect, I do talk to presidents and chancellors and they tell me wonderful things about their institutions. They don't tell me what you just did. They tell me about other things, which are all important, but they don't tell me what you just did. So is that something that was true when you started? Is that something that you profile because for you, it's your value proposition? Just say a little bit more about the fact that you know this, but that you also are inserting that in this conversation.
Well, to one of the basic points that each of you have mentioned about leadership, to lead faculty, we often, I even ask our faculty senate in a retreat every year, give me 2 words, give me an analogy for leading faculty. What is it like? And every year they'll come up with herding cats. And I tell them every year that is not the case because you can herd cats by just moving the cat food. What you have to do with faculty is engage them, and they have to know who our students are and how to engage our students. And that process of engagement, to go back to another one of the key themes here for both Ad Astra and Excelencia, is that for faculty members, it begins with data. If you can show them the data and understand the why, then you can get to the how and the what, and they'll be right there with you. You're familiar with the old phrase, probably heard this, that it's easier to change the course of history than to change a history course. The only way you can lead faculty to go back to the curriculum and make it no more complex than it needs to be, for example, is to start with the data. This is what the needs of our students are and why. And then they will come on board and do those changes. That's just one example. But I think we have to learn that in higher ed. One of the best summaries of leadership in higher ed that I ever read was written by a former dean from, I think it was the SMU Law School, called Leading Leaders. It's not the same as in a corporation. It's not the same as in the military. It's a completely different thing. And it's almost, and I'm sure Ricky and Jerome would agree with this, you have to learn it by experience, that experience of how to get it done. Anyway, starting with why and starting with data.
And I'll follow along with and add to what Steve said in terms of knowing your students. That is critically important. And in order to know your students, once again, data is important. I'm a scientist, so that is just who I am as a leader, relying on the data and being able to critically evaluate the data and present it in ways in which faculty as well as administration can understand and be able to chime in. One of the things that we're doing at Houston Community College right now, as we're developing our QEP, we have reading circles, and in the reading circles, we're all reading a book about becoming a student-ready college. And what that really means is for us to truly know the profile that Sarita presented earlier, really dig in even deeper and understand how to really take that profile, understand that profile, engage the students, and to create those wraparound services, to create those true learning opportunities in the classroom. And what I've told our faculty at Houston Community College is that we have to be intentional in the way that we choose to do this. Okay, so we have to intentionally design curriculum. We have to intentionally think about the various ways that we assess. So it has to be intentional. And it does need to come from an asset-based mind. And that's what really understanding the student-ready college, that's what it's about. Truly understanding that these students, yes, they may come with some challenges, but they come with value. And we want to promote that and really have those conversations with our faculty. And we tend to be strategic, or I am strategic in the way that you frame it all, right? So you frame the classroom interactions. You also have to frame and make sure that we as an institution put together intentional and strategic ways to address their needs. And we're able to use APRC to do a lot of that work, because once again, we're looking at a 60,000 student population that, yes, we want to cohort into smaller groups so that we can help them and target those services that they need. But we have to be strategic and we have to be intentional to do that. And that relies on the use of data and really trying to push the norms. The way that we've done this in the past, it won't work. We have to think about this a little bit differently, but it needs to be a collective, strategic, intentional approach.
I know Northwest Vista College, when I got there, this is my 7th institution, by the way, 2 universities, 5 community colleges. I have been at institutions, one of those universities where I had a dean of engineering tell me that they needed to recruit students of color. And I let him know that he needed to be at the community colleges then. That's where he would find that those students that he was looking for. He told me quite frankly that they didn't do well. Nobody did well. They didn't have transfer students. And it was a shock to him when we were able to show him that 45% of his students in his programs were transfer students. He didn't know. It really changed the way I looked at things for the next probably 25 years of my career. And so every place that I've been, we've tried to really make sure that not only were we following the data, but that we were talking about the data. We were talking about the results, and I couldn't do it all at once at Northwest Vista. So each year we have expanded, and this is across the district, being able to disaggregate that information and drill down into our key performance indicators deeper and deeper, so that we can look at all of those subgroups that we are trying to move the needle on. But it wasn't by chance that we went from about 21% graduation rate to 34.7% this year. It wasn't by chance. It was because I was able to garner a lot of support from faculty and staff that we were all in this together and we were going to move this needle. And so when we do, we celebrate. We celebrate every time that we move that needle. I used to jump up and down when it moved a point. When it moves 4 points, we celebrate, because that's the success of our students. I think the only way that you get this done is to make sure that everybody understands the data and understands what we're trying to do, the impact that we have. And I think that's the thing that has really won for us.
And I think that strategy is one that we share. The question just becomes the unit of analysis. So at Excelencia, the organization said, and I'm doing this to be provocative, so this is the windup, but it was the fact that we've talked about demography always. I mean, that's all we do is talk about demography. And we always say, I'm old, and so I remember CORE's the decade of the Hispanic, and then we did some other version in the 90s, and that we keep talking about it. And at some point I just said, there's a lot of us. That's the only thing. There's a lot of us. That lot of us becomes something through then how does that talent get engaged? How does that talent galvanize? How does that talent play out? And who serves them? And what I find we are all, like-minded. We're all saying data. And it's great that each of you are effective within your campus community at helping people keep their eye on the data points and that you reinforce it. Why isn't this story being heard? I mean, if Witchy keeps producing Who's Knocking on the College Door and has very effective, why? I mean, this is where, why is higher education so slow to respond? And how, because of this affinity that we all have and the power of the capacity that we're talking about, tools, strategies, data, information, as we seize the moment, which is we're going to get through this and we're going to come through it in a way that nobody's got time for some of this, and we're going to have to drive towards who's really being served. What is the efficient model? And not the efficient model for those who have always been served, but for all that wish to get a degree. How are we going to go into this school year like that? Go ahead. Steve looks like he's going to say something. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I wanted to tie, it's not enough to just use data and research findings, but to be effective, the next step is critical, absolutely critical to get people to change. I don't know if any of you have read the book Change or Die by Alan Deutschman. It's pretty famous, it's out there. Or people don't like to change, but to embrace change, you've probably all seen or read the little parable about Who Moved My Cheese. That's about embracing change. And all of a sudden the pace of change has become just warp speed accelerated, dumped on us overnight. But in addition to using data, and Jerome mentioned having had a reading group. A couple of years ago, I asked, our faculty came to me and said, would I buy a book if they would have like a group about it? We wound up having about 100 people read the book Switch. They selected that book. And the subtitle of that book is How to Change Things When Change is Hard. And what they did, the Heath brothers, just basically boiled down a lot of psychology research into 3 steps. And I think we're seeing some of this even on this call this morning. But the first step is to engage the rational part of your brain. Use data. That's the logical, rational part of your brain. And as human beings and as trained scientists, many of our faculty, they need that data. They need to know that rational part. But the second step, they called that the little human being in your brain, and he called it the writer, R-I-D-E-R, the person writing. What that little human being is writing on top of, though, is an elephant. And that's the emotional part of your brain. Every person out there, every student, every faculty member has that huge emotional part of their brain. And you have to engage that to motivate change. So you share the data, you share the logic, and then you engage the emotional part of the brain. And I think the most effective way to do that is to tell the stories of the differences that we've made in the lives of students. When those students stand up and tell that story, and it brings tears to your eyes to hear it, then you know you have effectively changed. It's not just the data. And then the third point, and that goes back to your program there, Sarita, is to highlight the bright spots, share the excellence, showcase those so that other people can learn. Anyway, that's where I'm coming from.
And I agree with that. It's the self-promotion. And we in the community colleges, we don't do that, in my opinion, enough. We get intrinsic value out of the work that we do. So we know that we are changing lives. We know that we are changing families for decades, okay, for change. And that's the value that we get. But I think that in terms of the community colleges, working with our senior partners, that we need to promote and share the stories and share the successes much more. And typically we just don't do that. But we know for those working in this sector, and I too have worked in other sectors, and I get the most joy out of working in the community college sector, is because on graduation day, when you see those students graduate and how excited the families are for an associate's degree and what that can do for those families, that's just, there's no greater joy. And that's the reason why we do this work. But we need to tell the story more. I think there's a time, or this is the time really, for the increased partnerships with our four-year institutions. Because many of our senior partners, as we've already heard, the bulk of their students come from community colleges, and that will only increase. So really is working with our senior partners and touting the successes and letting the community, those students that have come through the programs, be ambassadors for the great work that we've done. And I'll close by saying, you know, when we all do our little incremental steps, and that's what we're doing, okay? So we're all making changes, modifying, and we have incremental steps. Well, one day those incremental steps add up. And then you are able to see the movement that has occurred by those incremental steps. And that's the reason why we do the work. We do want to make change, but we know education is slow. You can't rush it. It doesn't happen that way, but we need to tell the story. We need to continue to make progress, which we are. And one day we'll realize how far we've come.
Ricky, would you like to weigh in on this one?
Oh, I'll have to. You know what? One of the things that we did in the spring that I'll say that if you want to impact folks and jump on that elephant, the emotional side, it's dealing with budget. And so we walked into that spring term after the spring break where we've gone remote, but we started talking about what can we do at this point? What can we do to impact our students after the spring? Not only during the spring, but we know that there's a summer melt. There might be a larger summer melt given COVID-19. And so we started looking at what dollars we had available across the district, which meant we had 300 open positions. We deemed about 100 of those essential. Those other 200, we decided not to fill it for the spring or summer. We also looked at our travel, our hospitality. We were able to carve out $10 million. What were we able to do? We have a summer momentum program that if a student did first and second, fall and spring, 18 hours, they got 3 hours free. We decided that every student who was enrolled fall or spring, if they were full-time, they got 9 free hours in the summer. If they were part-time, they got 6 free hours in the summer. We saw 15 to 20% growth over the previous summer of people coming in because we knew we wanted to keep them engaged on the campus. We also are bringing in folks as well via Zoom on being ready for the spring that are first time in college. And this is our first class of the Alamo Promise Group. So we're working on those as well. But we're able to do a payment plan. We're able to forgive balances of 500 or less for our students. It made a difference. It was a tough sell. People were going, it's my budget. At this point, though, I think everyone has bought in because they've seen that impact. They've heard responses from the students on what it meant to them. It kept them engaged. It'll keep them here, I hope.
Congratulations, and we should all keep our eye on both the achievements, so we congratulate you and celebrate that, but also the impact it'll have. Just to reinforce the theme here, the very thing about the emotion and the emotion at a moment as we move through it together. I mentioned that Excelencia held a forum for the affiliates from our Presidents for Latino Student Success in March, and one of the things that I was very struck by, because here people were in the middle of the going online and getting people off campus, and that's what was dominating most campuses. And it came up 4 or 5 times where people, professionals, were in pain because they didn't know what to say to graduates. They didn't know what to say to students that they've mentored. They didn't know what to say that could console them because the whole family had bought tickets and that's when we said, well, we can't fix that, but we surely can do what we can. And so what came out of that is something we call greater than graduation. And it's on our website. And in fact, your colleague, Robert Vela, from San Antonio Community College, did a video, and Richard Rhodes from Austin Community College, and William Serrata from El Paso Community College. The point of it is, again, still in this virtual format, that we came together. And the transcending part of it, and Tom, I'm going to come to you, the transcending part of it is that we emphasized that the theme of it was greater than graduation. Because the fact of it is, we're not going to be able to do what you had in your mind. We're not going to be able, the family's not going to be able to come, and we're not going to, you can do a drive and you can do things like that, but you're not going to do it. And you still got your degree, and now you are greater than graduation. So Jerome, to your point about how it feels, and that's the moment, how are we going to then help our graduates as they have to live in an economy and in a world that's very different? And what could be the role? So that's a hard one, Tom. If you have something you want to say on that one, but I didn't want to do this round robin without saying, Tom, on this idea of how to propel ourselves and what are the themes and what are the sources of strength, why don't you weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I actually probably have more to say on the original question that Steve kind of kicked off with the change management idea. And the only thing I really did want to highlight, and we're trying to lean into this as well, is one of the challenges we have is that the end zone dance in higher education is graduation. And if we're looking at a four-year institution and we're measuring that retrospectively over a 6-year time horizon with a cohort, that's too long. We can't, that's too much of a lagging indicator for us to reinforce the good things that we're doing if we're not measuring it for 6 months or 6 years. You can't reinforce the good behavior. You can't see that the changes are working. And so one thing we're looking at and trying to really focus now more on degree velocity, which is a hard thing to measure accurately, but by looking at the productive progress of each student each term, and trying to see, are they taking heavier credit hour loads because they can? Are they taking more productive credit hour loads because they're being advised in the right way, the pathways are guiding them, the schedules are allowing them to do that? Then that's our little way of looking at things in an in-progress way to reinforce the good behaviors so that people don't lose their attention. I mean, I'm impatient, and I will tell you that I can't watch soccer because they don't score often enough. And I might be offending a lot of people on this call by saying that, but it's the honest to goodness truth. And sorry, Rick. But the fact of the matter is, we can't expect our faculty to say, hey, we're going to do all of these really disruptive things, and we'll let you know in 6 years whether it worked or not. We've got to be able to provide in progress every term, leading indicators of our progress, and celebrate those along the way.
So we are growing closer to the end of this discussion, and we did have some shout outs clearly, but we also have a URL for the publication of Becoming a Student-Ready College. So I'm sure that we'll be able to share that. So this is where if you do have a burning question, please ask it. It really feels like we can keep this conversation going very well just amongst ourselves, because to your point, Tom, I mean, one of the things that Excelencia is doing, and I would be remiss not to bring it to your attention, is that since 2010, we have been monitoring college completion. And it was a very important stepping out for us. Because at that point, you had pretty big entities. You had the Gates Foundation, the Lumina Foundation, and at that point, the President, Obama administration, all talking about college completion and being first in the world. And it was a very satisfying moment for us because This is where the demography links up, because we could say quietly, didn't even have to yell. We cannot make national attainment goals if we don't have a tactical plan for Latinos. I mean, that was 2010. And since then, going forward, we've taken responsibility to monitor the progress towards these goal statements. And we do it by profiling states and colleges and universities within those states. And so there is, at the associate level, baccalaureate level, and graduate level. We have the data right now, and next month we will be releasing the new data. It's very poignant, because while there is an increase, and we're very proud, and we're going to celebrate that we're going to release it, we're cognizant that what we're releasing is about a system that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, I'm not saying it's doomsday and colleges and universities are going away, but what we will be reporting out is the impact of all the wonderful things that were happening in colleges and universities, when people were convening in classes, when people were on campus, and we're beginning now in the fall, a very different format. It's going to be varied all over the country. And we will continue. So we will continue so that in many respects, the data that's going to get released next month is almost the ground zero for chronicling how we as a sector lead through this moment, through the pandemic, tending equity and service for all students, and then measure it next year. So I want you to know that, but as you start this next school year, given what Tom just said, and Rick, I mean, you started off with this is what you're doing, and we've all just said to each other, we're gonna watch how that investment pays off. Just as we start to bring the conversation to a close, what are the one or two things that you go into this next school year saying, okay, being safe for sure, being operating for sure, but then beyond that, what are you using for your own, mental benchmarking? I said we'd do this, we're going to do it. And I'll start with you, Steve.
Okay, well, what we're doing is really rebuilding the engine. I mean, while driving the car, we're literally opening the hood, rebuilding the engine in real time. I mean, we're going to have to take it apart, put it back together. Some examples of the things that we're doing very tactically is building 6 8-week semesters into our schedule. So there's a question in the chat box about what are you doing in the scheduling. That's one thing we're doing right now. And so far we have 3,700 sections of courses just in the fall. As of right now, 10% of those, about 400, are already in 8-week formats. And that's so that students can begin and end. And I know Odessa College has gone completely to 8 weeks. Other community colleges have done so to meet the needs of students. We're doing that. We're also using the AdAstra data platform to tell us where we need more seats, where we need more sections, and we're doing it in real time. We don't just wait. We look at monitor basically every day. And we're adding those in real time, because the student, especially the first generation student or the more fragile student that may not have a safety net, if they can't get the course they need at the time they need it and the format they need it, then we failed. And so all of that is playing chess in today's world.
Thank you. Thank you. Jerome?
Yeah, what we're doing at Houston Community College over the fall semester, we will observe. Okay, so we have plans in place now, and we will learn from the fall, and as early as we can to make those necessary changes for the spring. But one of the things that we're looking for in the fall, depending on how the pandemic unfolds, really is this idea of what we call our flex campuses. So we know from our data, from our students, that our students need the hands-on type of instruction. They've told us that, and that's what they want. So we know that by surveying them. So that's knowing who your students are. So we built the Flex Campus model where we can have those classes on campus, and depending on the CDC guidelines, 9 students in a class, the rest of the students would be online. That could flex up or that could flex down. So we're trying to meet the students where they are. We know that they need that face-to-face. Once again, they've told us that. So we have those types of modalities in place. And we're working through exactly the pedagogy in a way that our instructors will be able to provide that type of instruction for students in the face-to-face environment as well as online. The other piece of that is around the online, what we call online on a schedule. Okay, so in the spring, as most institutions, you do a traditional type of online type of course where students are able to come anytime, but we're playing around with online on the schedule. So once again, we know our students, they want to see their professors. So we've developed a schedule that allows for that to occur. And we've also developed a schedule that is the traditional online. So I say all that to say that we're trying to meet students where they are. We're listening to our students and trying to provide those types of modalities that will help benefit them. And we are too using AdAstra to help us with monitoring the schedule. That's really important for us. Once again, we have 10,000 classes that we offer a semester, and we try to do all this to scale. So we have to be strategic and rely on tools to help us do that. But we're trying to be strategic, we're trying to be intentional, and we will learn from how things go very early on in the summer, in the fall for the spring. And you know, we have a schedule of sorts that we already have for the spring, but rollovers, that's over, right? So without truly knowing how the pandemic will unfold, we're going to have to make those changes, but we're nimble enough where we're able to very quickly make those changes when needed.
Anything more you want to add, Eric? And then Tom, I'm going to give you the last word.
Let me jump in there as well. Like Houston Community College, we have 5 independently accredited institutions with very different program portfolios. And so some of those have had to do some things this summer on some of those programs that required a clinical or a face or a hands-on by external accrediting requirement or whatever. So we've learned a lot from that environment. This fall, at least at my college, will be predominantly remote and online. We're calling that synchronous, that face-to-face, like we are today with the Hollywood Squares. We kind of look at that, and that has been probably the dominant way that we have offered this year. For this coming fall will be predominantly that synchronous face-to-face online. We'll also have our online as well. We'll have very few courses on campus at this time. We are a transfer institution, so most of our workforce programs can still be offered that way. We are also trying to front-end load a lot of the face-to-face and those clinical things up front, because we know that as it changes, we may have to move back or forward. We actually created a 25% comeback, but because of the increase in Texas, we pulled that back, and we think that all of our plans are going to have that fluidity to be able to adjust based on CDC and Metro Health. And so that's how we have gone toward this. The spring is really interesting for us because it's a brand new build. We did that this fall, but the spring is all new because we're not going to let them roll anything over. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to use AdAstra a whole lot on this, on trying to put these things together, both from an 8-week, a 14-week, a 16-week offerings to make sure that we're serving our students.
Well, I think these guys have really well, kind of covered the topic, and they're a lot closer to that kind of work than I could ever be. I get to watch the stuff that our partners do. I think, the only thing I would add is that I think students are going to to be forgiving to a point, if they could see that we care. We've got to communicate really well with our students, but it can't be just cliches. It has to be in action. It has to be specific things that we're doing. Everything's uncertain. They realize that, but pithy little comments without actual, responses, and being nimble and admitting when we've guessed wrong, that's not going to work. I think if we can just be transparent, we can be nimble, and we can, they can see our earnest efforts to respond to this craziness and come out the other side better, I think we'll be fine.
Thank you all so much. The questions that came up in some way have been answered. The bigger thing is that we are making common cause. The affinity was clear across this discussion, and I'm sure is going to continue as this summit does move into smaller discussions and really gets to the meat of the work, which is what are the actions, how will they be implemented in real time. For us at Excellencia in Education, we referenced this at the beginning. Tom, as the representative at Astra, we are pleased to make common cause with you. Pleased that Ad Astra will be with us as we do things like this in October. They're on our website. But most importantly, as we all move through this moment within our communities, for the students, for the communities we seek to serve, and that it is up to higher education to be strong, to lead, because it's a human enterprise. We will get through this because of the strength that we have in our belief in the future, and that is what higher education is geared to do. It is to serve our students, to propel the enterprise, and for our country to be strong as we go forward.